Hey everyone, welcome to Unity Basics. We're going to be talking about the standard shader right now. So I was to kind of explain what the standard shader is. I know some of you haven't done too much shadery work in Unity yet, so thought I'd kind of just give it a quick once over. So this is a little normal map sphere we made before. It's just a sphere with some normal maps on there. But I'm just going to kind of break down what a standard shader is. This is new to Unity 5. It's really awesome. I'm a big fan. So let's talk about what's going on in here. So first things first, this is the basic one that Unity will put on your materials. Your first option that you have in here is rendering mode. So opaque is the default one. It just makes a nice solid object. You can do cutout. Now cutout's really sweet for things with an alpha channel. So if you wanted to do something like leaves, let's see if we could let's find something with a cutout. So I put this circle on here. Let's do this sphere. Let's throw this on this plane here. So this texture is now on this plane here. Now you'll see that cutout is using the alpha channel from this texture here. And what cutout will do is it'll take your black and white information from your texture and we'll try and kind of smooth it out. So it's not using actual pixel alpha. It's using a cutout. It's trying to do like a nice smooth out kind of thing. This works really great for things like metal objects. So if you had a chain link fence or even like leaves, something like really harsh, right? It'll try and do a nice clean alpha mask for that. Now the nice thing about this is you can zoom in really, really close on this stuff and it won't look really crappy. It'll look nice and crisp and stuff like that. Now, next you could do is transparent, which will do the same thing, but instead of trying to cut out all your stuff, let me see if we get something properly transparent. Does this have an alpha channel? Damn you, Unity defaults. Alright, fine. Give me a second here. Let me edit one of these textures. Now we have this hex shape here. Let's just open it up in Photoshop, give it an alpha channel so we can actually do something. So if you ever want to do an alpha channel for your texture, I can just select this whole thing under my channels. Oh, it does have an alpha channel. I don't know why that's not working. So this is where you'd put any alpha information. So white would be 100% opaque and black would be 100% see-through. You know what it might be doing? It might be because I have a normal map in here. Might be freaking it out. Very strange. Oh, I guess it is transparent, it's not 100%, probably from the lighting and all that. So you'll notice that my transparency here is all nice and shaky, and if I do cutout, it tries to interpret that alpha as a harder shaped transparency, and opaque will just do that. So transparency will do that. Let me see if seems pretty black and white. Contrast it up a little bit. All right, so there's a reason why it's not fully transparent is because it's still getting reflection information in those areas, but you'll see that sphere disappears if we go over this opaque area. So that's kind of what transparency is for, really good things for particles, cloudy type things that are like semi-transparent, windows, all that kind of stuff. Now, if you ever actually want something to be fully transparent in these outer areas, you can set that to fade. And what fade will do is it'll ignore the shininess and all that, and we'll just do this center bit here. So this is a lot nicer of what kind of what we want. So this is if you want to do some sort of soft cutout of something that floats around, and you want nice soft edges and all that. So this transparency and fade run a lot slower, very, very hard for the engine to compute and do all that. but it looks really nice. And then cutout, cutout works a lot nicer. It'll as far as performance goes, it's like having a mesh. It's not that big of a deal. So you can use those a lot. So use cutout when you can, as often as you can, if you're gonna have something partially transparent. But sometimes there's nothing you can do, and you just need transparency. So you'll notice that I'm also getting a shadow from the cutout, and it'll actually do a dynamic shadow based on the alpha of the texture. Whereas transparency, you won't do that. The lighting information does not understand what is happening there because it's too soft. It's not actual info. Anyways, let's put this back to opaque, and let's get working on this guy. So let me just undo some work here. Well, messing around. Where is my sphere? I guess I didn't have that. Okay, so, all right, so let's go back to chatting about the shader here. So, again, we have this sphere. We talked about rendering mode. Next is albedo. So what is albedo? Albedo is the absolute color of your mesh. So if I change this to red, it'll go red, whatever. This is just the straight up color of your asset. Imagine you could see an object without any lighting whatsoever, whatever color it would be, that would be its like true self. Because like anything in real life, our colors come from many environmental aspects. So, you know, lighting, reflections, all that kind of stuff. But the albedo is the true just base color of it, like the paint or whatever you want to do. So if you put a texture in here, you know, you can add whatever, you know, whatever colors you want, and that's again straight up color. Now, like you saw before, if you wanted to do an alpha of for your object, if we were doing something like you know, like a chain link fence again, you would throw into the alpha channel of whatever goes into your albedo. There's nothing wrong with keeping it blank and just using the colors, you know, on its own as well. So that's that. Next, we have two very important things that work together. We have a metallic slider and we have a smoothness slider. So let's take the smoothness slider down for a little bit. And let me just select this so we don't have this guy here. So metallic is number one. So what metallic does is it determines, and this is what you should control, is how metallic your object is. Now, what it actually does as far as rendering is it determines how much color to get from your albedo versus the atmosphere. So at 0, it's going to use 100% of your albedo color, and it's going to use no reflection color. And as we crank this up, you'll see the color changes, and it's based more on the atmosphere. You see how blue it's getting there? Now, it is more from the light there, but it's also from this skybox. Generally, it's just going to get more blue. If we turn the lighting off here, let's make this a little red, and I crank this up, it's going to do red, but it's also going to get the color from the atmosphere. So this is just 100% albedo. This is albedo plus the atmosphere. So again, good thing for metallic objects, things like that. Now, your next slider here is your smoothness. Now, this determines how crisp, how smooth that reflection is in that object, and how crisp the lighting is. So everything is reflective, whether it's, you know, your clothes or glass or chrome or whatever it is. Everything gets some reflection from the environment. But depending on the coarseness of that material depends on how smooth that reflection gets. So, you know, something like clothing or whatever might be really, you know, flat like this. And then something like glass or chrome or, you know, plastic might be really shiny. And so that's what the slider does, right? So you could do something in between if you wanted something a little like satiny or plasticky, right? And then you're like, oh yeah, this is like really plastic. And then you can crank up your smoothness so much that you don't even get highlights from your lights anymore because it's so smooth. And combine this with our metal, you could start seeing that instead of using the lighting that's really close by, I'm using more of the atmosphere. So now I can get something that looks a lot more metallic versus something less metallic, right? More atmosphere. You'll see how it's getting darker up on top here from the sky. There you go. So between these two sliders, you can basically make any sort of material that you want, which is great. But let's say we wanted to have something, you know, not every object, almost no object is 100%, you know, one type of smoothness and shininess and metalliciness. So we'll go back to that in a second. I just want to add my normal map in here. Just it'll help me illustrate this other one here. So normal map is just where your normal map goes. This is the baked out normal map that we get from doing this. I have a tutorial making the sphere if you want to check that out too. So I'm just going to throw that on there. And what a normal map does is basically just tricks the lighting engine. It just says, hey, there is an edge here. If you're going to shine light on here, can you please put some brighter edges there? And then there's an edge here, but it's facing away from the light. Can you put some darker values there? And it just basically lies to the engine and tries to tell it, you know, what's actually happening on the surface without that geometry being there. So your normal maps will work together with your metal and smoothness maps. So, you know, you could start seeing I'm getting a lot, you know, crisper highlights because my gloss is really, or my smoothness is really up there. And then you can start seeing the metalness and the reflections more as I turn this from more of a metal kind of sphere to whatever. So let's take a look at you know, how we can affect this. So we can put a texture in this metallic slot here, but we can't put one in the smoothness because these are kind of, they're supposed to work together. So let's take a look. Let's make a metalness mask for this this guy here. So let's find my this is my normal map. It's not very good. It's kind of crappy. But anyways, let's make a metallic texture for this. So I'm just going to use this as kind of as a default. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to throw black on here. So this slider here in my material here, 0 is black and 1 is white. So if I want to put a texture in here, I could just put in different values of white and black and everything in between and control this slider through a texture. So if we go in here and we take a look at my normal map, now let's say I wanted to have a streak in here that is non-metallic, right? So let's put a black streak on here, and then this guy is going to be all white. So this is going to be my metal map now. So if I'm going to save this, save it as a texture, normal, metal. I'm going to save it as a 32-bit, and we'll kind of talk about that in a second. So I'm going to go back to Unity. I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to throw that texture that I just made in here. So now you'll see that there's a stripe down the center that's not metallic anymore. I have metal, metal, and then not metal, and then back to metal. Right? Sweet. That's pretty nice. I got two different looking kind of things in there, which is awesome. But you'll notice when I throw this in here, my other slider disappears too from my smoothness. That's because my smoothness is now also controlled by this texture, but the alpha channel of this texture. Now, by default, my alpha channel is this, so it means it's 100% glossy everywhere. But what I can do is I can delete this alpha channel, and I can copy over this same texture here. Let's put it in. Oops. I can copy this over, paste it into my alpha channel, and save this as a 32-bit. It needs to be 32-bit to save that alpha channel. That's right, so make sure it's on 32. And now what will happen is now I have this guy here is completely metallic and super glossy. And now this guy should be completely flat if we did it correctly. So we have that. Oh, it did not save my alpha channel for some reason, so that's just, I'm just going to close this down. There we go. Now that's in there. So now we put our strip in there. Now you'll see this is all flat, and that's super shiny. And if I wanted to, I could just go in and invert that. And now I have a really flat part here, and a really glossy part there. So now it's metal but flat, and then non-metal but shiny in the middle here. And so in this way, we can go through and start doing some really fancy stuff. So let's say I had my sphere. Let me just open up this normal again because I need it as a reference. I'm just going to throw it over top of this this texture here, just so I can kind of see what I'm doing a little bit. Actually, like that. So let's say I have this whole sphere is painted. Let's say it's painted red. It's not metal anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to say no metal. It's all 100% black. And make this a little bit opaque for now because, well, whatever. I just hide this for now. It doesn't actually matter. Make another layer. I'm going to take my white paint and, you know, let's start thinking about this metal sphere as something that was rolling around and being used. So I'm going to, you know, maybe select like a rougher texture here or brush. And this is, you know, I'm doing this with my mouse here, so it's not going to be very good. But let's say I've added, you know, some edge wear here. Let's do some little edge wear. This is going to look really bad because, again, just using a mouse, use your tablets, right? Paint in some nice edge wear along the top of this thing. Right, something like that. Right, maybe this whole thing got scraped off. So anything I'm painting white right now, I'm imagining as something that is no longer paint, but is now raw metal, shiny, chromy metal, because the paint has been worn off. So let's do that. Let's just do a big one here. And maybe, you know, this guy got a giant scratch on him. You got a couple big scratches on here. All right, again, really shitty. So there we go, we have that. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna collapse it down, I'm gonna select all, copy it, I'm gonna paste this into my alpha channel as well, because I kind of want this to be super shiny too. Maybe I don't want it to all be 100% black, because I still want the paint to be kind of shiny, so I can go into levels and maybe just do something, you know, like that. So let's save this as our targa again, metal. Now this is starting to look a little bit more interesting. Now we have areas here that are 100% metal, and they're super shiny in there too. Right? I even have this part that's kind of worn down, and I think I painted this on the wrong edge. I painted this on the interior edge by accident. But you could start seeing that now this is all exposed metal. So let's do it on the actual proper part. I wasn't paying attention to my to my texture here very well, was I? So this is actually wrong. This should not be. Just going to delete that. And let's paint in this whole thing here. Let's do a big one. I got really, really scratched up here. This gouge is like huge too for some reason. All right, whatever. I'll collapse that, copy it. I'm gonna paste it back into my alpha channel here. I'm gonna save it. Let's go back to Unity. Now, here we go. This is, again, really shitty painting job. But now you'll see that this whole part here is metallic and super shiny, right? And I can start making things look like they're worn off, right? They're metal and whatever have you. So if I actually did a nice job on this and made this all streaky, maybe even baked out a little normal map for this after where the paint is actually a little raised up, you know, I can go through and make this really awesome. So this actually might be too glossy. I think that's why it's not looking that great too. Remember, 100% gloss doesn't look all that great either. So let's do this, you know, something like that. There we go. Now we have this like super shiny part and a really matte part, but it's still a little shiny, right? Because we want it to still be like kind of plasticky. Maybe I want it a little bit more shiny than that. Adjustments, levels. All right, maybe crank that up to something like that. There we go. So now we still have like a shiny plastic kind of sphere, plastic or coating or whatever is on there, paint coating. And then we have something, you know, really shiny up in this area. So again, that's kind of the general idea of what the metal and normal maps do. So this is really the heart of any mesh or texture that you're making. You want something to look awesome, you paint a really sweet normal map and metallic map for it. Height map kind of does what it sounds like. Let me take this here. See here we have our height map. It's going to try and fake the idea of you know, height or changes in height on your mesh. It doesn't do, you know, it's not actually going to add different height, but it's going to just try and fake it a little bit. I don't use this too much. Sometimes it can look a little funky. Occlusion maps, what they're used for is, let me just throw something on here. Let's throw this hexy guy on here. So you see here, I threw this hex on here. And what this will do is it'll kind of determine what parts of your mesh are darker. So we'll usually bake out an occlusion map for things that are actually kind of occluded. They're, you know, really deep areas, really, you know, like these bolts in here or this little area here. I'd bake out a little bit of an occlusion map of any of those little hard creases, and that way it just helps to push the lighting to darker areas and make them actually feel a little bit more real. So bake out a nice occlusion map for your dude. Emissive mask or map here. If you don't put any texture in here, you can add a color to how you know, how emissive you want your thing to be, and then you could crank this past 1 if you really want it to glow. In the camera view, if you have a bloom on here, it'll start blooming as well. The nice thing about Unity 5 is if you have your object set as static and you let your dynamic lighting you know, bake out, what will happen is this emissive will actually light your environment as well. So you see here, if I turn all my other lights off and I crank this emissive, it'll actually add lighting to my scene. Now unfortunately this is not dynamic, so it will not move around with you. It's not an actual light source. It needs to be baked. I have my bake set on auto right now, so it'll kind of keep updating that. But for environmental things, if you have, you know, lanterns, little glowy bits, instead of having to place lights all around there yourself, you could just use the emissive channel and crank things up. Now, that being said, you may not want your entire sphere to be emissive. Maybe you only want certain parts of this to be emissive, so you can paint a texture for that as well. So let's go back to our trusty Photoshop. All right, we have our normal map texture again. Now, let's say in this instance, we only wanted a little bit of our texture to be glowy. Let's say these things weren't bolts, let's say they were lights. So we wanted to make them glow. So what I would do is first I would just paint a mask for them. Again, I would do a much better job than using a mouse. I would actually trace them properly. But for tutorial's sakes, you may forgive my awful artwork. And maybe I'll do one at the top here. Let's say this little button is glowy. And then this bottom part I would fill with black. And so basically anything that's black will not be emissive. Anything that's white will be 100% emissive. So let's save ourselves glow. And this one could just be 24 bits because we don't need an alpha channel. And now I can pass this in here. And now only these little guys will glow. So really nice, you know, you could do a really sweet Tron look for your things, or it's really nice for, you know, robots or whatever, if you just want little bits of your armor and stuff to glow. And you'll notice that the scene isn't as red as it used to be because there's a lot less emissive on there. It'll actually use the texture to figure that out. You know, if I start cranking this, then yeah, it'll start lighting it up. That's fine, depending on how bright you want these lights to be. So anyways, that's our emissive, and you could set this to be, you know, GI. Real time will update. Anything that is baked, it will update this stuff in real time, which means that if I go in here and I change my color to green, this stuff, you can change colors and things real time. You just can't change positions in real time. So that's still really sweet though. All right, and then we have our detail stuff in here. So if I wanted to add a detail mask, like this hex for instance, and well, let's just backtrack a little bit. Let's get rid of that detail mask. Let's talk about the secondary maps here. Sometimes you have an object like rocks or something like that where a player is going to get really close to them, and you're not going to be able to make a good enough texture to hold up that close. So what you can do is in this normal map section, you can put in something that's, you know, really like tiley, and tile the crap out of it, right? Just do like 12 by 12. And that way when people come up to it, it'll look really crisp because it's a bigger texture, tiled a lot. And in this way, you could still have a normal map for your object and add a secondary one afterwards. And you can make it really subtle. If I just wanted to do 0.1, you know, I could zoom in here and have just like this like nice little detail. Like obviously this doesn't make sense because it's rock. Like a rocky normal map, but I could still have that in there. And I could do this for an albedo as well. So if I wanted to have the stained glass in here as my secondary albedo, I can. Now, unfortunately, they don't have a slider for how powerful the secondary albedo is, which kind of bites. Would be nice, and all that. But what you can do is add a detail mask, and what that'll do is the white and black. White parts will use 100% of this stuff. Black parts will use 0. So you could do like a 50% gray one in there, and then you'll see it'll fade away where that detail mask gets put in. So even if I got rid of this, you'll see my normal maps go from nothing to having a gentle little normal map. So really nice way of adding, again, a little bit of extra detail to your mesh, and kind of going to town on that there too. So hey, there you go, this looks a lot better. To show you that chrominess. Get rid of this too. There you go. Now we have a nice painted chromey, whatever. And that being said, you know, I had this albedo set as red, which is my paint color. I should actually do this same texture here, this my metallic texture, and I should put that in here too. So that way, but inverted, I guess. I should do red and then make this gray. So let's just do that quickly. So let's make, we'll have this texture here. This is our whatevs texture. Let's adjust. Let's do levels. Let's just brighten this thing up a bit first. Right, and then do, what I'll do is I'll go select color range. I'll just select the gray stuff. And then I'll just color shift it. All right, so this will be my red paint. There we go. So I'll just save this as an albedo. Oops, that's that one. All right, there we go. So now I can put this as my albedo. I can change this albedo just to white so it's not interfering with that. There we go. Now we have a much nicer look of, hey, this is paint. This is, you know, scratched off whatever. Scratched off paint back to just chrome. And there we go. This is looking a lot nicer. And it's really dark because there's no lights in the scene right now. So if I put this directional light on, there we go. Be back to red. And there you have it, with those simple textures in here. Well, they're pretty complicated, they get pretty crazy. You can make something that looks pretty kick-ass. Not like the sphere, this kind of sucks, but you know, keep that in mind. Metal, gloss, normal maps, emissive maps, all these things work together to make something really kick-ass. So hopefully that was a pretty good quick overview of the standard shader. Should at least let you know how to use all these different things and what they do and all that. So thank you.